Hi there, everyone. Alison McGinley here, and it's the first day of a week long of training, talking about emotional abuse. And I'm talking, of course, I want to make sure that I give you some good quality information, but I don't overwhelm. I've got a tendency, if you've been in my group for a while, you know that once I start talking, I find it difficult to stop, especially if it's something that I'm passionate about, and this is something I'm passionate about for various reasons. I've been a perpetrator of emotional abuse. I've been on the receiving end of it. And hi, Karen, thanks for joining. So just to give you some background on what I'm looking to do this week is we will start today really identifying, what is emotional abuse and what it isn't, more especially what it isn't. The reason I want to do that is I often have people asking me, and I'm quite shocked sometimes by some of the things that are happening in people's relationships, and not necessarily just their romantic relationships, but in the relationships in general, that have been going on for such a long time that they don't actually they don't see that there's a problem with the type of behaviour. It becomes so ingrained in the fabric of the relationship, whatever that relationship happens to be, whether it's romantic, whether it's familial, whether it's friendships, that they kind of lose track of the fact that it's not healthy, it's not right. Sorry, I'm blinding myself. I've got a light on behind me and I'm blinding myself. So I really wanted to give today over to just describing really what is emotional abuse and what it isn't. And then during the course of the week, I'm coming on, I'll be doing, hi Lee, I am joining. I will be running a sort of 30 minutes each day at different times each day so that you can maybe catch me live. If you can't always catch me live, you can catch me live on occasion. The videos will be in the group for the next couple of weeks anyway, the next 2 weeks anyway, to allow you to catch up and do this at your leisure so that you can watch, think about, and mull over, and then come back and ask questions if you have any. So today we're talking about what is and what isn't emotional abuse. Tomorrow we'll go into a bit more detail on the types of emotional abuse. On Wednesday, I'm putting that over to passive aggressive behaviour, because that is a killer in any relationship. It's an absolute killer. It's the thing that leads to relationship breakdown. It's the thing that's very difficult to pinpoint, because again, it's so ingrained in our relationships, and it's very difficult to identify it because it's something that we see all around us, and we maybe, certainly I grew up with it, and it was my coping mechanism, it was my negotiation mechanism, because I didn't know how else to express myself. So I want to spend all of Wednesday discussing that, and then we'll look at identifying how it shows up in your life on Thursday, so that you really have a clear picture of what it looks like in your relationships. Again, any relationships, and how that feels, what it does to you, how it makes you feel, how it makes you perceive your surrounding, how you perceive the relationship, and what it makes you feel about yourself. And then on Friday, we are going to really look at some tools that you can use to help you start shifting out of those patterns, because they are basically patterns of behaviour and communication. So I'll share with you some patterns, some tools that you can use. And Saturday, I won't be doing anything. I'll drop a couple of posts into the group. I won't be going live because it's my son's 16th birthday. So I'll be spending it hopefully with him. And then on Sunday, I'll run a question and answer session. So that'll probably be a bit longer. We're looking to do 30 minutes maximum each day, but on Sunday I'll run an hour-long session of questions and answers. If you've got any questions at any point, drop them into the group under the hashtag question, and I can pick them up, and if they're not answered during the course of these particular videos or live streams, then I'll address them on that on Sunday. So that's basically what we're how it's going to look. What I want to start today with is, as I say, what isn't emotional abuse. Now, emotional abuse is not somebody disagreeing with you. It's not somebody having a different opinion to yours. And that, yeah, unless, of course, and there's always the exception, unless, of course, it is, I say black, you say white, and no matter the situation, if I say black, you will always say white, and if I go for white, you'll find black. That does become problematic. But in general terms, it's not, that is not emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is not somebody shouting, it's not arguing, it's not somebody having a different opinion to yours, no matter how strongly it's expressed. Maybe it's unpleasant to be on the receiving end of that, but it's not necessarily emotional abuse. Emotional abuse can, however, be if somebody is screaming hysterically at you and is screaming over you in a way that you can't make yourself, you can't express yourself and you can't make yourself heard. And if that's a pattern in a relationship, that can be classed as emotional abuse. And that is debilitating. It's very debilitating for the receiver. And it's also really a very unhealthy communication style, because nobody achieves anything when that's, when that is the communication style. Nobody achieves anything. So those are the things that are not emotional abuse. What, however, is emotional abuse? Well, emotional abuse, the term emotional abuse or psychological abuse is, as I say, is a lot more difficult to identify than physical abuse, of course, because by its very nature, physical abuse, we feel it on our skin, we feel it on us, and we know that it's wrong. Emotional abuse or psychological abuse is a lot more difficult to identify. One, because as I said before, it's ingrained in society, and it becomes so much like second nature to us that we find it difficult to recognize it when it's actually happening to us, or as was my case, whilst we're perpetrating it. The other thing is, we're not taught about abuse. We're not taught about emotional abuse or verbal abuse. We just don't know what it is. So, if you don't know, you don't know. You can't identify it. And often the one thing that I would say at this point is, something's happening here. Sorry, something came up. I hope I don't have a virus on my computer. But the one thing I would say is, if something feels uncomfortable and if something feels wrong, then it very possibly and very probably is some sort of abusive mechanism that's going on. If you feel uncomfortable with the way somebody's treating you, but you can't quite put your finger on it, then go with your own gut. That's always the best place to start. And it's a very difficult place to start, because what we tend to do is we tend to look for the best in other people. We tend to look for the best in scenarios. So we tend to push down our own gut instinct or our own feelings, our own heart feelings, or whatever it is, or even our own thought process. Sometimes it can be very clear in your mind, this doesn't feel right, but I'm going to believe what this other person's telling me because I want to. So I would say the very first place to go back to is your own feeling. If it feels wrong, then it most likely is. On the other side, if it feels too good to be true, then it most likely is. So, I would put that as the basis of this whole week. It's all about going with your own feeling. Now, I don't talk, I'm very simple. I like to keep it simple. I don't like to get confused, because I can confuse myself very easily. I don't like to get confused with too many sort of big ideas. So I'm going to keep this as simple for you as possible. And hopefully give you the information that you're going to need. The reason that I'm doing this, and the reason I want to do this, is not because I want you to be able to go out and blame other people. It's because I want you to be able to understand what's happening and step out of that feeling of being a victim. And and step back into your power. And when when you've identified that there is a problem, that there is something that's not working in your communication, in your relationship, and you can step out of feeling that somebody is getting you, because it's very difficult not to not to feel victimized when you can't quite identify what the problem is. You feel that there's something wrong. You feel that you're not being treated well, but you can't really get to grips with it. When you've identified it and you can say, okay, that this is happening, this is a thing, then you step back into your power and you can make decisions on how to change the patterns of communication, hopefully to get rid of what feels like an abusive situation. So I'm not going to talk about huge, big, highfalutin ideas. I'm keeping it very simple. So what is emotional abuse? Emotional abuse, the aim of it is to control the other person's feelings, emotions, and mind. Sometimes it happens on a completely subconscious level or on an unknowing level. So a very good example is, so as I say, on Wednesday, I'm going to spend the whole session talking about passive aggressive behavior. Why? Because it was my biggest problem in my relationships, not just with my husband, but in all my relationships. So my pattern of behavior was I didn't feel that I was being listened to. I didn't know how to make myself understood. I didn't feel worthy generally in life. And therefore my belief system told me that nobody was, no one would believe me and no one would spend time listening to me. So what I would do is, instead of actually telling people how I felt, I had an array of coping mechanisms. I would be hurt, I'd be upset. And what would I do? I would sulk. As a teenager, I could sulk for days. I'd forget, I'd lose track of why I was sulking, but that was a big thing for me. I would sulk, I would, I'd cut you off mid-sentence. I would be rolling my eyes, I'd be sighing, I'd be, my body language would be, notice how unhappy I am, go on, ask me. But I never had the courage to actually say it out loud. And if somebody did call me out on it, I would more often than not be brave enough to say what was going on. So I would deny it. I would deny that there was anything wrong. And what does that do? What I'm saying and what I'm showing are two completely different things. People tend to want to, at least on the surface level, believe the words that you're using as opposed to the body language that you're showing. So I caused a great deal of confusion in other people. They began to doubt themselves. They began to mistrust their own thinking. They began to question the relationship they were having with me. It began to be really difficult to be in a relationship. And that was, everything from being my mother to being my friend to being my boyfriend, husband, or kids, because they didn't really know where they stood. So that's, that is one area that quite often we're not even aware of. I didn't know that was a pattern. I didn't know what passive aggressive behavior was until I identified it in myself. So we don't know what we don't know, and we can't change anything until we're actually become aware of it. So it may be that, that as we're talking, you have an idea that is your reaction as well. Should I do that? I have done that, not in all my relationships, but in this particular relationship with this person, because they trigger something in me. And that's a great place to start. Okay, well, why? What is it they trigger in me? How do I behave? What is it that I'm trying to get from that person? Because what this whole week is going to be about is coming back to you and understanding how powerful we are as human beings, even when we're feeling really, really that we're lacking in power, that we have no power, that we have no control. We are incredibly powerful, because what we're giving out creates a ripple and creates the response that we get back from other people. So if you feel that you're being abused, emotionally abused, even physically abused, but I don't have any, I don't want to talk about that because I don't have any experience of that. If you are being, certainly let us know, and we put you in touch with the right people without a question. But what I what I want you to be able to do is see how your behaviour causes a ripple effect and therefore causes what you get back in, and give you the tools to be able to go inside of you and start to make those adjustments so that you become a much stronger force to be reckoned with, so that you know what you want to give out into the world and how you want to be treated, and you dictate that accordingly. You put that out accordingly. But until you know the reasons behind your behaviour, it's very difficult to do it. It's very difficult to do. So the starting point is, of course, okay, have I identified that I feel emotionally abused? Great. Well, that means that there's something that I'm doing that's allowing these people to do it, that's giving them permission to do it. So what can that be? What can I be doing? Am I not, am I scared to push people away? Am I scared not to stand my ground because people might leave me, people might not love me, people might not accept me as I am? For me, that was it. That was my big thing was, if I asked for what I want, they might say no because they don't think I'm worth it. They don't believe that I deserve it. So my coping mechanism was twofold. It was people pleasing on one hand. I had no boundaries at all. You ask me to do something, of course I'll do it. More than that, I'll be in there trying to do it for you, trying to manipulate and do it just so that I get, so that I'm in the middle of your life. And then I won't get it back from you. I won't get the same respect back. I won't get the same attention or affection or time back. And then I begin to feel resentful. And then when I get resentful, that's when I go into my passive aggressive behaviour. Well, I gave you all that time and you're not even prepared to. That was the way that I approached life and relationships. It's very different nowadays because I've learned how I behaved, and that gave me the power to make a decision to change. Excuse me just a second, because the kids are playing music and it's putting me off. Let me just close the door. That's better. Back again. Here I am. So that is, once you've identified that you are being emotionally abused, then you can start to work back and understand the why of it. So how does emotional abuse show up? Well, it can be all sorts of things, but it doesn't necessarily, and this is something that I really want to reiterate, it doesn't necessarily mean that the relationship is dead in the water if these patterns are recurring. It can just be a bad pattern that has developed. It's a bad pattern that can be changed. So if you recognise anything that I'm saying, don't panic. There are tools that we're going to talk about later in the week that are going to take you out and give you the ability to change the way that you interact in your relationships. But it can show up in many ways. I've talked about passive aggressiveness. Gaslighting, that's another thing that we use. And we hear it often with regards to narcissists, but we all do it. We all do it. And it's not nice to be on the receiving end of it. And that can be very much done from a place of kindness, done from a place of love. We want people to feel good. We don't want people to suffer. So quite often we try to minimize what they're feeling. We try to minimize their feelings and their emotions. By saying, oh, it's not that bad, or you shouldn't feel like that. These phrases here seem very banal, but actually they're kind of soul destroying, and they're ego destroying, and and if your self-esteem is already on the floor, if somebody says that to you, you start to think, well, I shouldn't even, I'm so flawed that I shouldn't even be feeling these things, or I don't deserve to feel these things. We pick up all sorts of weird signals when we're not standing in our power. When we hear what we believe rather than what the other person's really saying to us, because nobody, so gaslighting can be one that everybody uses, and we use it with our kids as well. They fall over, they scuff their knees, they're crying. We say, oh, don't worry, it's not that bad. Instead of saying, oh, poor love, that looks sore, clean it up. you'll be fine, and off you go. And again, it's a pattern that can be changed. So gaslighting's one. Ghosting is another one. And that's one that I was very much, I could do that quite easily. You offend me, I don't know how to speak my truth. I don't know how to tell you I'm offended. More than I don't know, I would be terrified in case you told me once more, I don't deserve, you don't deserve to feel any differently, or you don't deserve to have me treat you any differently. So my response to that would be to disappear. I would just disappear into the background, and until my emotions had calmed down past that. That could be a lifetime. I let friendships go using exactly that method. Well, I don't know what to say to you. So what will I do? Well, I'll just go. That's it. Friendship done, dusted. And and I can't tell you how many times that was that was a pattern. How many friendships I let go because I just didn't know how to say, I'm hurt. That was bad. Again, I've learned differently, and I'll give you some tools to be able to do that come Friday. So those, that's another way that the idea that that it always comes back to us. It always comes back to what's going on with me. Now I call myself I was a passive aggressive people pleaser. That was and that's again taking responsibility for my part in all my relationships. I didn't know how to interact. I didn't know how to be completely honest with people. I didn't know how to show up as me. So what would I do? I would people please. And as I said before, where did that lead me? It led me to being frustrated, letting me feel like I was making me feel rather that I was a doormat, making me feel that I was less than other people because I would give and they didn't give back. I didn't say no. I didn't know how to say no. So it led to bitterness inside of me. And it got to the point that I would avoid certain people because, let's be honest, if I am in people-pleasing mode, and most people are fairly decent human beings, if I'm attracted, if that's my mode, if that's the way that I go out into the world, who am I going to attract? I'm not going to attract the people that want to have balanced relationships. I'm not going to attract the people who want to be, to be equal and have a give-take relationship. I'm going to attract people into my circle who are there to take and take and take, and will be offended if I have to give. And even with the best will in the world, when I finally crumbled and crashed and burned and had to ask for help, my husband and my mother were thoroughly offended by it. They didn't understand it. They never had to be in that relationship with me where they had to give me something, because I'd always been giving and giving and giving. And it took a long time for them. Of course, they came back into balance. Of course, they wanted to give, but they didn't know how to, because that wasn't the basis of the relationship. So when we're in people-pleasing mode, we're going to attract the people into our circle who will, to then, by tendency, I can't think of that's a big long word, tendenzialmente, no, that's Italian, will have the tendency to abuse us, because that's what we're allowing, that's what we're giving in. We're setting ourselves up to be abused. We're setting ourselves up with we're basically handing other people our carte blanche to treat us as they wish. And often what goes hand in hand with that is our inability to accept help back. And the reason that we struggle to help, to receive help back, is because we don't know how to set boundaries. We don't know how to say, thank you very much for your help, but that's enough. Or, not allow ourselves to be overrun. So we keep people at a distance. And therefore, again, who are we more likely to attract into our circle? Those that don't want to give back, those that only want to take. So when we start to recognize our own patterns of behavior, it kind of makes it light. Kind of gives you a different view of the world, doesn't it? Because no longer do you have to be scared that the next relationship you get into, or the next friendship that comes along your way, or any other interaction that you have is going to necessarily end up bad. It allows you to say, well, now I understand where I wasn't holding on to my power, and where maybe I can work on myself and therefore change the way that people deal with me. It just lightens it up, and it gives us a whole sense of possibility, that certainly when you feel that you're being abused, you don't feel you have any. You feel pretty hopeless. You feel pretty violated. You feel small. You feel useless. You feel that you're never going to be able to make the changes necessary, and this pattern is just going to continue. But when you realise, actually, shit, it was me, and I didn't know any better. And we don't say that because we want to beat ourselves up. No, we say that because suddenly, the light's been switched on. I can see where I can make the changes in me, and I know that I don't have to worry about other people anymore, because when I do these things, when I start changing, internally, and when I start to set boundaries, and when I start to take my eye off what's happening out there and pay attention in here, everything's going to change. I don't need to worry anymore. By default, it's going to change. It just has to. People cannot treat you any differently than you allow them to. So if you say that's unacceptable, they have two choices. Either they have to change the way they behave, or they have to disappear off. It was me and I didn't, hold on. It was me and I didn't know any better. Now I will. I'm pleased. Yeah, and me too. And it's a lot of the time, we set ourselves up for it. And we set ourselves up from a place of low self-esteem for whatever reason. That was my problem, and it took a long time to identify that was the case. Now that we have the ability to do something about it. So there are many, many more ways that you'll be able to identify whether you're being emotionally abused. I'll just sort of run through 2 or 3 of them quickly, so that you've got an idea in your head what to look out for. That first one that everybody always relates to is, when you're walking on eggshells, when you're terrified of saying the wrong thing, for inflaming, getting that inflamed reaction back. We've all been there. There's always that person that you're carefully crafting what you're going to say, because you're not quite sure what the reaction is going to be. That's quite a good indicator that you're dealing with some sort of emotional abuse. The other one is that when you're sitting back and you are constantly, instead of being able to freely have a conversation, you're constantly thinking about what you're saying. You're constantly playing over the conversation that you want to have. That's another good way of identifying that you are somehow being abused. Somebody that doesn't listen to you when you're trying to make yourself understood and somebody's pushing you down. That's another way that you can identify, that there's something wrong in the pattern. And I'm calling it emotional abuse, but it does often come down to this pattern of interaction. Once we identify it, we can change that. But when you feel that you're unheard, when you feel that you have to push and push and push to make yourself understood, or to make yourself to be taken seriously, or if you've got somebody that constantly says, that's not how it is, you shouldn't feel like that, that's not how I meant. Those are all patterns coming back at you that make you understand that you're in that place, you're in that relationship space. So yeah, I don't want to go on. I'm almost at 28 minutes. That's perfect. I didn't want to go on much more than 30 minutes today. I just wanted to set the scene. I hope it did. You can let me know if it did give you some sort of clarity. Karen, you say that it was you recognise yourself, those behaviours in yourself, and now you can do better. Anyone else watching on replay, again, if you get any questions, pop them in here, or pop them into the group just with a hashtag question. Tomorrow we're going to be looking really in depth at those different patterns of behaviour. So we'll be looking at gaslighting, we'll be looking at different sorts of emotional abuse in a bit more detail, just so that you can identify them for yourselves. You can tick them off, or you can say, no, that's not my problem, and you can move on from it. But at any point, please do shout out and ask any questions that you've got. Thank you for joining me live. It always makes it so much nicer to know that I'm actually talking to somebody rather than just talking into the world. Let me see, I can see my daughter is my emotional abuser, and I taught her that as it was how I was brought up, and it's exactly how I was brought up. You know, I remember clearly the manipulation that my grandmother used to throw into our family, and my mother did exactly the same thing with us, and I took it on as mine until, you know, I started my journey probably about 8 years ago now, and before that it was my abuse. It was my only go-to. I didn't know how to do anything else. I didn't know how to make myself understood. I didn't know how to have a discussion. I was sick to the pit of my stomach when somebody shouted. So I couldn't argue. And more than that, whenever I did get into a discussion, I would cry, so I'd be embarrassed and I would stop. But, you know, for you, Karen, what I can say is we can lead by example. So when you set your own new boundaries, hopefully during the course of this week, you'll understand what your boundaries are, because everyone's are different. And when you start working on those, and when I say boundaries, I don't mean to push other people away. I mean to keep us safe from our own patterns of thinking and behaviour. But over the course of the week, hopefully you'll be able to identify what those are. And when you can identify them, you live by them, you put them in place, and your daughter won't be able to react in the same way. So when you're leading by example, hopefully you're giving her the tools that she's going to be able to take forward into her relationships. So, you know, you can break that pattern going forward. You're in a place now that you, having identified it yourself, can break the pattern of behaviour going forward. But if you want to talk, you know, on further, you know, in any more depth, reach out and we can have a conversation about it. But hopefully during the course of the week, you will get a bit more clarity. Thank you for joining. Tomorrow I'm going to be on a little bit earlier. I think I'm on midway through the afternoon, so I don't know if that's going to be too early for you. You may still be in bed, Karen, so you may not be able to join us. But it will be in the group. It'll just be hashtagged day 2 with the title of the video, so you'll be able to find it there. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for being here, and yeah, do watch it back. If you've just joined now, do go back to the beginning and watch it and help yourself identify a couple of patterns of emotional abuse. Have a lovely rest of the Monday, and speak soon. Bye.